Oh goodness, you're raising very big um, questions there. I mean, in the past, I would say, the record is fairly evenly matched in some ways. I mean, the Christianity and Islam are the world's foremost missionary religions, and so they've both spread, if you like, on the coattails of empire. Islam, I mean, as a matter of historical fact, even more than Christianity. To start with, if you bear in mind that Islam, within 2 or 3 generations, had an extraordinary success in spreading right across North Africa and into Spain. I mean, there was a serious idea at various points at the end of the first millennium and into the second that the whole of Europe or much of Western Europe might succumb to Islamic conquest. Um, Christianity was very different to start with, of course, because it was a religion of, I mean, it's the only one of the three monotheisms to specifically originate in a rejection of religious violence. Um, Judaism originates in the conquest of the Promised Land. But of course, this is not for a second to suggest that Christians have not been very violent and intolerant as well at different times. What I'm saying is that for 3 centuries, Christians were very countercultural. They tended to be the faith was particularly attractive to women and to slaves. It was a religion of the outsider. It spread a long way, but more among the dispossessed than among the wealthy. But then the faith was embraced by the Emperor Constantine, of course, who made Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire. And of course, once you're in the position, having been sat upon yourself to sit upon others, then human nature being what it is, it's likely that you will start throwing your own weight about. So Christianity did then spread through political conquest, rather like Islam did. The Crusades were conceived because I'm no apologist for the Crusades. Don't get me wrong, but they were conceived because previously Christian societies had themselves been conquered by Islam. I mean, Islam was embraced by Persia and other societies further to the east, which were very advanced, and it made Islam civilizationally extremely potent. I mean, for the first half of the Muslim era, that's to say between the 7th century and, let's say, the Ottoman conquest of Constantinople in the second half of the 15th century, Islam is very much top dog, and then the conquest of America serves to tilt the economic balance, and Europe, which had been something of a backwater, suddenly starts to become much wealthier economically. And as you know, the scientific revolution also takes off in Europe, and the Enlightenment and the birth of democracy and so forth. Has the West been very critical of Islam? Well, I mean, in some ways, I think there's been a great urge. You know, you look at the speeches of people like Clinton and Obama. There's been an enormous urge to stress that this is not a clash of civilizations. It's not some kind of attempt to um, present contemporary geopolitical conflicts as being about one faith against another. They've been they've been George Bush Jr. sort of less so, but brighter people than him, I think, have been. You know, you look at the speeches of Blair, for example, always saying, you know, our quarrel is not with a great faith like Islam, but with um, a, a, a perversion of that faith by people who basically have a sort of political agenda, and religion has become politicized, and they're using their faith for political ends. Don't forget also that wars have been fought in defense of Muslims. That was why the West went into Bosnia. The West having twiddled its thumbs a little bit in the early 90s, while the Serbs were displaying extraordinary aggression after the breakup of the former Yugoslavia. I think there was a decision particularly after the Srebrenica massacre, in which most of the victims were Muslim, that this was simply unacceptable and something had to be done. And to its credit, I think the West brought down the regime of Slobodan Milosevic, who, I mean, he wasn't really a Christian, but he did drape him. He was one of these people, you know, you see it in different religious contexts, who like to drape themselves in a religious mantle, even though their aims are basically political. He'd been a sort of communist apparatchik, but he pretended to be an Orthodox Christian, and the West unseated him. The West also intervened in Kosovo in 1999, where ethnic Albanians who were overwhelmingly Muslims were at risk of a massacre by the Serbs. I You will not be amazed to hear, I thought that the invasion of Iraq was a terrible mistake, not least because of all the, you know, what a pressure cooker Iraq has been for a long time. I did support the overthrow of the Taliban in Afghanistan in 2001 because I had seen horrendous levels of suffering in that poor, benighted country, not just during the 1990s when the Taliban were in power, but when the Soviets invaded in 1979 and brutalized that country horrifically throughout the 1980s. And as you no doubt know, one of the ironies of recent geopolitics is that the Americans secretly armed the Mujahideen rebels in Afghanistan, these Islamist rebels, and their insurgency was what led the Soviets to retreat in 1989, I think it was. But by this stage, these Islamist groups were heavily armed, and they went on to you know, have a let's say have a less than positive impact elsewhere. I Look, I mean, I believe deeply in Christian Muslim friendship. The 20th century was all about a battle of political ideologies, you know, communism, fascism, liberal democracy. It seems to me much more likely that the 21st century will hinge on whether Christians and Muslims can get on well together. Um, I do regard the rise of Al Qaeda in the 1990s as deeply regrettable, and I think that the narrative which they spun, which was very successfully spun, but not very credible, that somehow the West has this naked ambition to overthrow Islam and interfere here, there, and everywhere. Um, it was overpitched. I mean, I think the West has intervened too much. There has been too much colonial adventurism, but then there's been an awful lot of interference by strong societies in weak ones for a very long time. Russia and China are now exercising neo-imperialist projects in Africa. I've already said to you that the much of the Arab world was colonized for centuries by the Ottomans. We hear rather less of that. And to the credit of the West, I mean, we have at least been much more hospitable in recent decades. I mean, I don't know whether you've asked yourself ever how strange it is that millions of people in the Middle East and Africa are very, very keen to come to Europe, even though they themselves are Muslim. And I work as a volunteer teaching English to Turkish asylum seekers and to Syrians. And I've asked them more than once, did you not want to go to Saudi Arabia? Would a rich Muslim country like Saudi Arabia not have been a more um, uh, logical destination for you? And to a man and a woman, they have said unanimously, Saudi Arabia is not interested in hosting Muslim refugees, and we feel very grateful to the UK for having been more hospitable towards us. We could be more hospitable, and I think Europe should do more. But I think you and I and our viewers can feel very proud, for example, that London is now one of the great Muslim centers of the planet. It's a bigger center of intellectual Muslim life than almost any other city I can think of, with the possible exceptions of Cairo and Jakarta. At any rate, London rates alongside them. There's every reason why Cairo and Jakarta should be great Muslim centers, because Cairo has been a great Muslim center for well over 1,000 years. London hasn't. And I think it's to our credit that we are, notwithstanding some big mistakes that we've made, that we're also a porous and tolerant society.